Welcome to the Collide Kids Podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Collide Kids Podcast. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids Podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. I am so glad that you're listening today. And before we jump in, I just want to say, I'm so sorry we missed an episode last week. If you notice, we did not have an episode released last week because I've actually been without a voice for almost 2 weeks because of a terrible cold. And I was singing in my church production, and that just made matters worse. So here we are. So we had to skip a week, and I apologize for that. It's really hard to host a podcast when you cannot talk, but I'm finally feeling better, and it's just in time for the Christmas season. So I'm really grateful to be back with you. By the way, last week, I was able to finish up releasing a brand new 4-episode series on my other podcast, 7-Minute Devotions for Busy Parents. And it was all about the names given to Jesus, the Messiah, from the prophecy in Isaiah 9:6 that says Jesus is the wonderful counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. You remember that one, right? Well, it turned out to be such an encouraging series to my heart and to a lot of others I've heard back from. So if you haven't listened yet, I hope you'll head over there and check it out and be encouraged this Christmas season. I think you'll really like it. Well, let's get started with today's guest. I am so excited to welcome back my friend, Christie Thomas. Christie was a children's ministry director for over a decade and now is a family discipleship coach who equips and encourages parents in their faith journey. She's also a mom who loves raising and homeschooling her amazing and hilarious boys up in Alberta, Canada. And she wanted me to tell you her family does not live in an igloo, but they do get lots of snow, which makes me jealous. Christie writes wonderful books for kids and parents to help families create faith-filled moments together. I think you guys are going to really find this conversation very helpful, not just for your Christmas season, but for your whole year. So here is my conversation with Christie Thomas. Well, Merry Christmas, Christie Thomas. I am so excited to have you on the Collide Kids Podcast today.
Well, Merry Christmas to you too, Christen.
You're a Collide Kids Podcast veteran because you've been on before. And I think we were talking about before, your last episode was around Easter. So now you're here at Christmas. So you're my holiday expert, I guess.
Oh, boy. I don't know how I feel about being an expert.
Would you just introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Christie Thomas, so you got that one right. I am a wife. We've been married for 20 years. I have 3 boys who are mostly teenagers. One considers himself a teenager, even though he's not quite there yet. And I'm a writer, and I teach children's ministry, and I play piano, and I am what I like to call a domestic engineer, which means that I take care of the home, too. Oh, I also homeschool my boys. So there's a lot of hats happening in my life.
Yes, I love that. I also have a lot of hats, but I do not homeschool. But I do understand there's lots of things that we have to do. And if you're in ministry and you're working and you're being a mom and a wife and all those things, it's a lot. But I appreciate what you do. And I'm so glad you're here today for this conversation. I think it's going to be really great. Before we get into your story, I always ask my guests to tell me a joke. So do you have a joke for us today?
I do. All right. So what's worse than an apple with a worm in it?
Ugh. I can think of a few things, but I don't know. What's worse than an apple with a worm in it?
An apple with half a worm in it.
Ugh. And the discovery, you're like, wait, no.
Here's the other half.
Yeah, a little protein added to your apple bite. There you go.
That's right. Well, they say the bugs are the way of the future, the protein of the future, right? So.
Oh, wow. I don't want to be a part of that future, if that's true.
Yeah, I'm okay with chicken.
That's right. I'll take chicken all day. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you are doing. Aside from being a wife and a mom and a homeschooling educator, you also do a lot of stuff with families and you create resources. You're a writer. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in all of that.
Well, I've always I've always liked writing, in fact, and telling stories. And one of the things that I used to do is I used to have a little tape deck. I don't know if, your listeners even know what a tape deck is, but I would hide in my mother's bathroom, and I would tell stories into my tape deck, and I would listen to stories as well. So I have always liked telling stories and writing, but when it kind of became official as something that I actually got paid for was during my term as a children's ministry director. I did that for most of 12 years, had a few babies in there, but most of the 12 years I was doing that. And in that time, I started writing things for families to take home. And I ended up publishing those take-home pages as a book. And that became my very first thing. And I realized, oh, I'm a writer now. That's kind of fun. And so all my other books have come out of that time and that experience of my first book was self-published, and then all the other ones have been published by traditional publishers, which has been fun and aggravating and all the feelings all the time. But I have quite enjoyed the journey that God has taken me on.
That's amazing. How many books have you written so far?
Oh, that's like asking your children's birthdays. I think it's 6.
Okay.
So it's actually 7, but book 7 is also book 1, because the one that I originally self-published got republished last year by traditional publishers. So it's 6. We'll say 6.
Okay.
6 or 7?
A 6, 7. Oh, no. I just had Dave Ray on the show, and we talked about all the things that our kids say that we're like, we don't know what it means. We hope it's good, but, So I love that you have been writing this long. And one of the things that I think is so interesting that almost all of my guests talk about is they say, when I was a kid, I used to do this thing. And that was how, that's kind of what started it. The thing that I was interested in, or the quirky thing that I always did, ended up being my job someday. So I think that's so neat that that's part of your story too.
And I actually didn't expect that to be part of my story for a long time. When I was in high school, I thought that I was going to be a doctor. So I got all my sciences, all my maths, and then I went to Bible college for 1 year, and then I went to take my biology degree from university, planning to get into med school. And then I met my husband and was like, do I really want to work that hard? And so we got married, and I ended up working at the church and just loved that so much. So I was like, I wasn't that attached to that anyway. So now I have this biology degree. But yeah, it is very cool that God did take what I loved when I was a child and I stopped writing probably for 15, 20 years, creatively. But then he brought it back into my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's talk about one of your books, which I'm very interested in because I need help with this. And I think a lot of our listeners, especially our parents that are listening, are going to need help with this too. You've written a book, Little Habits, Big Faith. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that is about, and why you wrote that book?
I wrote it because my theory over the last several years has been that you don't have to know it all or do it all in order to disciple your kids. You just need to start small and let God grow the fruit. So it started way back when I was in my early years of parenting, and I would read all these family discipleship books and feel some of it was inspiring, and some of it I just thought, oh, I can't do that. My family life doesn't look like that. I'm working part-time. I'm not homeschooling my children because I did work. My kids went to public school for several years. And I just thought, I can't do that. The expectations felt so heavy on me. And I don't know if it was that the book was putting these expectations. Some of it was that the book was putting expectations on, but also some of it was me just taking on these expectations of what family discipleship should look like. And so I put those all aside and thought, you know what? I don't like Christian parenting books anymore. I don't want to read them. It just made me feel too guilty. And over time, I started talking to other families and realized, this looks different in every family. So even though these books are, the big names of the day, it doesn't have to look like that. And I'm seeing what discipleship looks like in other families, and that it's, successful as in, God is using it, right? Mm-hmm. Because in the end, it's not so much about what we do, but it's about who we're pointing to and inviting mm-hmm. God into it. And he's the one who does the hard work of changing hearts and minds. I can't take my child's heart of stone and turn it into a heart of flesh. Only God can do that. So I started realizing, well, what can I do? Well, I can do these little things. And I realized that, so this actually ties into one of my other books, is that I had started writing these take-home pages when my oldest son was 2, and the take-home pages were just like a little touch point every day of something that you could do with your kids, your preschooler at home, that connected to the Bible story that we'd learned at church. And I eventually put those into a book. So my son had been doing those age 2, 3, 4, 5. We'd gone through the Bible a couple times by that point, and it was like just a couple minutes a day. And he went to Christian school, and his teacher, who'd been teaching there for like 20 years, during parent-teacher interviews, she says, he knows a lot about the Bible. And I thought, okay, doesn't everybody? Like, we're all Christian school kids here, but he stood out for that. And I thought, that's from like 2 minutes a day, probably 4 or 5 days a week. And that started me down this journey of realizing that God loves to take the weak and use it to show his strength and his goodness. And when he took those 5 loaves and 2 fish and he made them feed 5,000 people, that's the kind of stuff that God loves to do. And he wants us to rely on him. And so this was kind of twofold. First of all, I was encouraged that the little things that I was doing had a big impact on my child's faith. And, there's no silver bullet to faith. My kids still have to make their own decision on that, and they have to connect with God in their own time, in their own way. But the little things I was doing was making a difference in building that foundation. And secondly, that there was something that I could do. If there was somewhere I was feeling like this area is not great, I could do better here, I could take that to God and I could say, what's something small that I could do? Something that takes like 30 seconds. And he would give me ideas. And so I started talking to other parents about this and helping them figure out their own 30-second habits. And then parents started telling me the stories of what was happening beyond those 30-second habits. And I thought, there is definitely something here. And then I read a book called Tiny Habits and realized this is actually the way God has wired our brains. He's a professor at Stanford and has written all kinds of stuff about tiny habits and I think he taught the people who invented Instagram.
Wow.
So he knows how to instill, how to use the power of tiny habits, right? To get you to do something and to change your life. Yeah, I just realized this is how God wired us, and we can use that understanding to change our discipleship habits.
I think that's so fascinating. One, that there's science behind this, but 2, that it just takes 30 seconds to a couple minutes a day. Like, that's so doable. I think we get so overwhelmed thinking about all the things at once. And so we don't try anything instead of if I would just take 2 minutes a day, anybody can do that.
Well, and anybody can do it, especially when you pair it with the habit formation science says something to the effect of like when you pair it with something that you're already doing. So I like to think of it like Velcro. So we've got one piece of Velcro, which is something that you're already doing with your kids. So maybe you're driving them to school, or maybe you're sitting with them for breakfast or for dinner, or maybe you're tucking them into bed or giving your toddler a bath. Think about something that you're already doing every day. So maybe at breakfast time, you could read a devotional to your kids, a really short one. Or maybe on the way to school, you could pray. Or as they're getting out the door of the van, you could pray a blessing over them. There are so many things that we can do in those little moments when we're already with our kids. Because when we think about family discipleship as this big thing, we think, I have to rearrange my life to make this work. But really, what works, and even you can see this in the Bible, is where God says, talk about me when you're, and my precepts, when you're walking along the road or when you're going to bed. And we talk about that all the time, thinking, okay, well, it'll just come up. We have to still do this big thing. And then we'll do these little things too. But actually, no, we could just do the little things. The little things become the big thing over time.
It's not about rearranging our whole life. It's about inviting God into our life and allowing him to take control of that.
I want to show you my jar of rocks. Now, you've seen this. You've seen this analogy before, but I'm going to change it. So you've seen this analogy of the jar of the rocks and the pebbles and the sand, where you have these big rocks that you have to get in first, and then the little rocks and the sand, which of course you have to put in last if you want to fit everything in, right? And so we often think that family discipleship is like these big rocks, where we have to, in order to fit in family discipleship, because our jar is full, we're going to have to take something out in order to fit discipleship in. Well, I would say that God isn't a big rock. He's actually the sand. Not because he's low priority, but because he connects and binds everything. Colossians says, in him we live and move and have our being. He is in all things and through all things, and through him all things hold together. So he's actually the sand. So if we can start using this idea of the tiny habits to help ourselves see him, I guess, as the sand in our everyday moments, then it becomes so much easier than trying to figure out which of the big rocks we're going to take out.
Oh, I love that. Because I think we've all seen that, like that analogy. And I think it's good to think about like foundationally, like these are the things that are important to our family. So if your family is not going to church and that doesn't fit into your life, then that might be something that you want to consider, changing or making arrangements for, because that is where God is going to do so many things and provide so much for you in that community of faith believers. But I think for those little things that we get bogged down in, we always get bogged down in the little things, and we start to think, or like for my kids are a little bit older. So, I look back and, I wish I would have done that when they were toddlers, or I see, people doing I wish I would have done that. And I do have those feelings, and maybe I should have done those things, but I know that I am doing some of those little things. Can you talk about some of the little things that we can do, some practical ideas of how we can include these tiny habits of faith in our daily lives?
Absolutely. Well, and if you want like a whole, if your listeners are interested in podcasts, I have my whole podcast. That's like the whole goal of it is to break down this tiny habits ideas into very specific habits. So one thing that you could consider is gratitude. This is kind of the season when we're thinking about gratitude, November, December, we want to practice gratitude. So is there a time of your day when you could just invite your family? Okay, what's something that you're grateful for today? Maybe it's at supper time, and you could just make this a habit of doing every day. Or maybe it's at bedtime. Okay, where's somewhere that you saw God working today? However you'd like to word it, that's a really simple thing that over time, it actually there's a phrase in a hymn that says, "Tune my heart to sing your praise." So I think that's what we're doing is in these little things, we're tuning our hearts to God. So it doesn't seem like a very big thing at the moment where you're just, one time you're thanking God, but you do it again and again and again every time you put your kid to bed or every mealtime, and it does tune our hearts to see God's grace and to sing his praise. So gratitude is a good one. Bible reading, if you want to do Bible reading in a more accessible way, often we think it has to be like quite big and big family worship event. What if you just read a proverb every day? You just open your Bible, I practiced and read a proverb. Like that would make a difference over time, right?
Sure.
Or a verse or two from Psalms. That's it. We often just think that it has to be, a whole chapter or this big long devotional that our kids are kind of, not really getting much out of. Just read something that takes 30 seconds.
I love that. I think those are great ideas. And, it, like you said, just it builds up over time. Like as we do that, it really makes a difference. What would you say, like we're in this season of gratitude and going into Christmas, there's, we're all thinking about all the things for Christmas. That's when we get real busy and real bogged down. Do you have some practical tips for this Christmas season about tiny habits?
I don't know if I have any specific ones that are like daily, but I would recommend picking something that you could do once a week during the Christmas season. So maybe it's not going to be a daily thing because people's lives are very upended during the Christmas season. I feel like it's pretty much impossible to do something the exact same every day.
Right.
But you could pick once a week to do something. So I love, and I've always loved, the tradition of lighting Advent candles, where you just pick, you could aim for doing it on Friday. If you're not home on Friday night, do it on Saturday. If you're not home on Saturday, you do it on Sunday, right? You just know sometime in the weekend, we're going to light this candle. And I have, if your listeners are interested, I have a free resource on my website that is like a Advent candle. You could call it a liturgy. I call them readings that are appropriate for ages 2 or 3 plus. And it's just, you read a little bit of the Christmas story and you light your candle and you say, God's people waited for the promise to come true. And then it kind of builds every week. So it's something very simple. It does take more than 30 seconds. It's kind of a little bit of a different kind of a habit. It's more of a seasonal habit. But we've been doing it for years and years as a family. And I know other families and even churches that have been using the same thing year after year. And when you use the same thing year after year, it does become something that becomes really meaningful for our families.
Absolutely. Yeah. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? Like we don't have to do it something different every year. You can do the same thing and keep that tradition. And that's beautiful. And that's something your family's going to remember. this brings up a great idea because we're also talking about, or as parents, we're figuring out what we're going to get our kids for Christmas. They give us a big list. My kids do PowerPoint presentations of like all the things they want. And we just kind of like, okay, maybe, So, the older they get, the more specific they get. But I've always tried to get them something that is good for their faith, whether that's a new Bible, as they get a little bit older, we want to get them a Bible that's age appropriate, or like some different books or devotionals or so I'd love to know, what are some things that you get your kids? Do you do like a faith-based gift every year?
I have tried to do that most years. At a certain point, I'm like, I'm kind of running out of ideas. The oldest is 16, right?
Yeah.
But I do like to see if I can find something that will encourage their faith. So we've done, like one year I got one of them the Action Bible devotional. So it was like a portion of the Action Bible, but also devotional. Like we don't want to base our entire faith off of other people's thoughts, like devotionals and stuff. But I do think that they can help. They help us disciple our kids, right? They're thought through. They are engaging. And so sometimes something new like that will catch our child's attention like other things won't. So right now, one of my teens, my 14-year-old, is reading a devotional that I was sent for review. And I was like, here, you read this and you review it. And it's actually for children, but he's actually really been enjoying it. And it's helped him get into that habit of reading every night on his own. And I'm like, so you never know what's going to click with them, right?
Yeah, I love the ones, especially because my kids are a little bit older, where it's like a devotional and they read a passage of scripture or Bible verse, but then they have to like journal or they have to like take notes or write down a thought. So they are reflecting a little bit on the content of what they're reading. And I think that's always a good thing, especially because kids they are about like, just give me the info, and we have to teach them to think through this for themselves.
Yeah, and to sometimes just be quiet for a few moments. Our world is so loud and there's always podcasts and TV and video games, and you could be living in noise for your entire life. So for them to just have that couple minutes.
So I love this idea of devotionals. Like you've written, we were talking about this earlier about the book that you self-published, and then just last year you republished it. So I would say that would be your 7th book. I think that counts.
Hey,
because you had to update it. Yeah. So tell us about, this is a preschool devotional called My First Devotional. Tell us a little bit about this book.
Oh, well, this is like the devotional of my heart because I wrote it when my kids were little. And so the purpose of it is to be an interactive play-based devotional. So, and it's also designed for you to sit on one Bible story for a whole week because I originally wrote it to go along with my Sunday school lessons so that families would take this home and they'd have 5 days of really simple things to do at home that they would actually remember to do because it was simple and short and consistent. So because I find that consistent helps me actually remember to do things. So, for example, every day has like kind of my paraphrase of the story, which you could use or not use if you don't want to. So they're all a little bit different. But it goes through the entire Bible. So it starts at creation, goes all the way. Well, we don't do Revelation with the 4-year-olds, but
that's probably a good idea.
But we do the book of Acts. And so we have something like God is opening the Red Sea. So you're going to get a bowl of water or fill a sink up with water, or maybe your kid's in the bathtub or something, and you're just going to ask them to blow really hard to make a pathway through the water. And then can they do it? No, of course not. So can you do it? Who is the only one who could make such an amazing miracle? And that's it for the day because you've already run through the story once. And then the next day, you're going to do this thing with the water wherever you happen to be and what's most accessible for you. And then the next day, I also have a value of kids actually reading from the real Bible and not just devotional. So almost everyone includes a few verses from the actual Bible. But while they're doing that, I give you an idea of something for your child to do. So I recommend that you have some sort of journal and some crayons kind of nearby whenever you're doing this, because every week I say something like, read the story straight from the Bible. Here it is. And then have your child draw a picture of the sea, which a 2-year-old can do. They can just scribble blue, right?
Right.
Something very simple. I actually wish that when my kids were little, I had thought to label each one of their drawings. Because now I look at them and I'm like, these are really cute, but I have no idea what that is. And then, the next one is Moses and his people were really, really scared, but God helped them be brave. Brave. Do you know anyone who's brave? Let's see if we can think of some brave people. And then we talk to God about that. And then why was he brave? He was brave because God was with him. And there's a prayer at the end. So every one of them is a little bit different. I try to make sure that there's some playing and talking and reading the Bible every week.
I love it. And it goes right back to your little habits. It's just short. It's just easy for you to take a few minutes of something you're already doing, like you're already in the bathtub or you're sitting at the table. You can take those moments to talk about that. Whether they're 2 or 12, you can still take time just to talk about your faith. Okay, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the science of habits because, we're in December. Next month is January, and we're going to start talking about New Year's resolutions and all the things that we need to improve on our lives. And I don't know if we're like that hardcore. I feel like a lot of people have like pushed back on New Year's resolutions, but it's still something we're starting to think about as we're starting fresh. What are some things about the science of habits that are going to help us in the new year?
Okay, so the science of habits is really, it's the way that God wired our brains so that the things we do regularly, they actually get it's almost like they get stuck in a zip drive, if you know what that is, in our brains. So that your brain says, oh, we are always doing this thing. So when we open the fridge, we pull out the milk. I don't know. And so our brains turn those into little files in our brain. And then they kind of get stored. And so every time you do that prompt, so you walk into the kitchen, you just start pouring yourself a cup of coffee. And maybe you find yourself walking into the kitchen at 11 p.m. and you're pouring yourself a cup of coffee and you're like, what am I doing? Well, that's because of that little zip file in your brain. Your brain says, oh, we walked into the kitchen, we pour yourself a cup of coffee. Or, if you've ever found yourself on the highway going the exact opposite direction of where you actually needed to go, but going the direction that you normally go, that's a habit. And so much of the behaviors that we do, I guess we can hack that. In order to create things that we want to change in our lives. So there's multiple books on that. Atomic Habits you can read. It talks about a lot about that. Tiny Habits, The Power of Habit, all those habit books will talk about the science behind it. But one of the biggest things is that every habit starts with a prompt. So before, when I talked about habits, when you're trying to start something new, you want to make it like Velcro. It's because that first thing, the thing that you're already doing with your child is the prompt. So let's say you decide you want to kind of reconfigure bedtime with your kids. Maybe bedtime's gotten really crazy. So now instead of, you're running out the door and you're slamming the door because you're so frustrated with your child, you're going to say, okay, I'm going to rework this habit a little bit. So maybe once they get into their pajamas, which is the thing they always do every night, I'm going to pray. That's exactly right then. Maybe even as I'm putting their pajamas on, I'm just going to pray over them. And that's going to change your bedtime over time, right? For sometimes you're going to be like, oh, thank you, God, for this kid. Amen. Right? But
Lord, help him go to sleep.
Exactly. But over time, that becomes something that then can calm your bedtime down.
I love it. I think that's great. And it's just, like you said, it's that Velcro thing. So finding those things you're already doing and how you can insert some type of faith habit. There are such small things that we can do that really do make a bigger impact. And so I love that you have this resource about that. Where can our listeners find your books and find out about how they can get this Little Habits, Big Faith book?
Well, the best place is just to go to my website, which is littleshootsdeeproots.com. That's also where I am on Instagram, Little Shoots Deep Roots. But you can find all the links on my website, links to my social media, links to my books, links to podcasts if you're interested, all there.
Well, this is awesome. I'm excited. And for all of our listeners that are looking for great gifts for other families in your church or for people in your family, kids that need some type of devotional, I think that would be a great resource. So definitely go check that out. Well, thank you so much, Christy, for being on the show today. This was so fun, and I've learned a lot, so I appreciate you being on here. Before I let you go, I always ask my guests to tell me a memory from when they were a kid. So what do you want to share with us today?
Well, I'll tell you a Christmas memory because this is coming out in December.
Okay.
My best Christmas memory. So to be honest, I have very few memories from before I was about 7 years old. I just don't have that kind of brain. But I have this one Christmas memory, and it's me kneeling behind the Christmas tree and asking Jesus to come into my heart. And I think I was probably about 4 or 5 years old. I don't know exactly how old I was. I don't think I told my parents, so they don't know. But I do have this very distinct memory. So it was something that really stuck with me.
Yeah. And you did it behind the Christmas tree?
Yes.
That's so cute. I love that. What do you think it was? Was it just the conversations you were having, or you just...
It must have been, or our church used to always do these Christmas musicals, so maybe I'd seen that, or Sunday school.
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. I don't remember almost anything. I was 4 when my sister was born, and I don't remember her being a baby at all. I only remember her being like 4 years old, maybe at the minimum. So for me to have this memory of me being that age is really special to me.
That is special. I love that. And, I do think Christmas is such a great time to share the gospel with other people and to share it with your kids, because their hearts are open to hearing the stories of Christ. And so it's a great time to do that. So for any of our listeners that are like, I'm wondering when I should talk to my kids about the gospel, this is a great season to do that. So definitely do that. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was really sweet. I love that. I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas to you too.
That was so good. I love getting to talk with her. I love when she said, you don't need to know it all or do it all to disciple your kids in faith. You just need to start small with what you have and let God do the rest. That needs to be like on a plaque or a t-shirt or something. And she said just 30 seconds is all it takes to start something new. So just think about it. If you could commit just a few minutes a day to disciple your family, it would make such a huge difference in their whole year. I also love when she was talking about the rocks and the sand, that analogy we see all the time. And instead of thinking about God being the big thing in our life, he's actually the sand. He's actually the thing that holds everything together. He's the one who connects all our everyday moments. So instead of trying to take something out to fit God in, we can just add God in these tiny moments into the things we're already doing and just allow God to use these everyday moments to help our families. Like bedtime or driving in the car together or sitting down for a family meal. Those small moments are the things that are going to build up over time and make a huge difference. We mentioned a lot of great books and resources, and so I'm going to include an Amazon list of the different books we mentioned today, as well as other authors and resources that have been recommended to me on this podcast for the past couple of years. So if you want to check out that Amazon list, if you're looking for good books or some great gift ideas, that will be available for you in the show notes. All right, now it's time for one of my favorite parts of the show. It's our family discussion segment. So this is where we get to ask a few fun and thoughtful questions to help you keep the conversation going. So if you want to pause after each question and talk about it right now, or maybe listen to all three and see if there's one that you like the most, or talk about them later, whatever works best for your family. So let's talk about it. Here's the first one. I want you to share your favorite Christmas carol and how it gets you in the holiday spirit, or how it prepares your heart for celebrating Jesus at Christmas time. Okay, here's the second one. What's one Christmas tradition you do as a family that's your favorite? Like baking cookies or singing Christmas carols together. For me, my favorite is driving around, going to see the Christmas lights. So what's yours? And number 3, what are some tiny habits that you can start as a family to bring your faith into your everyday lives? Well, I hope these questions spark some great conversations with you and your family. Hey, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to connect with me on social media and let me know. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. And don't forget to share this episode with friends or family who you think could use some encouragement or just some great family content. You can always head over to collidekidspodcast.com to catch up on past episodes, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can watch the full interview from today's show. You know, one of the best ways you can support this podcast, and any podcast really, is by leaving a rating and a review on your favorite podcast app, especially with Apple. It really does help the algorithm, help more people find out about the show. So be sure to do that today if you've not already. And as this year is winding down, it means so much to me to know that you guys are listening and that you're praying for this ministry. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for praying for the Collide Kids podcast. And for all the other things that are happening over here, I really appreciate that kind of support as well. Well, I hope you guys are having an amazing Christmas season as you're celebrating with your church family and with your extended family and your immediate family. I hope you guys get to bake some cookies and see some Christmas lights and do all the fun things. And in case no one has told you today, I would love to be the first to remind you that God loves you so much. Merry Christmas. You know, raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.